This is the first video that I'm making for my new YouTube channel. And my YouTube channel is basically a diary for myself to show what I've been doing here in France, what life is like here in France, the work I've been doing in my house. You can see I'm sitting in my living room at the moment, and this is what it looks like right now, is what it has looked like for quite some time. And I'm now, it's July 2020 now. I bought this house about 2 years ago. We arranged the buy in August 2018, and as is normal in France, it took about 3 months for everything to go through. I paid my deposit, I arranged the mortgage, I signed the documents, and then in November, I wasn't here at the time, but in November then the sale officially went through and it became my house. So I have a few pictures to show of what it originally looked like, and I'm going to show those now. The first lot that you'll see are what the kitchen looked like. So the kitchen was the main focus of any work that I did last year, because the kitchen started off being a very small, very pokey little space with a beautiful front. It's essentially the front door. It doesn't really have a hallway, this house. Beautiful front door, but that wind used to come through unbelievably. It was very small, very pokey. At the back of it was another room that was apparently the third bedroom, but really was too small to be a bedroom, and the previous owner had used it as her office. And so the pictures that I'm going to show you now are of the kitchen, and I will come back to you after that. So the next few pictures show the sitting room, and the sitting room was one of my favorite rooms in the house. One of the things that sold this house to me was the floors. And so you'll see that the sitting room has these lovely parquet flooring, not your classic French herringbone parquet, and not the enormous squares that you see in chateaus either, but very, very nice parquet flooring, kind of mid-century, because the last time this house was renovated was in 1963. The story continues when I eventually took out the old sink in the kitchen, which was the only thing left of the kitchen by the time I got here. There was a piece of newspaper behind it that had 1963 on it, so that was the last time any work had been done. What you will also see in the pictures are the MDF boxes that were put around these beams at the time. So it wasn't very fashionable or considered very a sign of wealth in a house like this to have these wooden beams exposed. And so they covered it up with MDF boxes. And obviously when they were doing the renovation, they put the boxes on first and then plastered up to the box. And so when I had all of the beams, all of the boxes removed and the beams restored in here, I was left with holes in the wall that I then had to fill in. And I will show you more of that later on. But yes, the floors were one of the big things. Unfortunately, I also love the floor in the kitchen, and I saw it in pictures. That turned out to be lino, which came up, and I'll show you what I did with it later on. But for now, the pictures of the living room. The third set of pictures that you're going to see are the bathroom. There is one bathroom in this house. It was originally a 3-bedroom house. One bedroom was the small room that was behind the kitchen, and there'll be more about that later on. And the previous owner told me that she had lived in that room just on the ground floor for a very, very long time. And of course the bathroom, which is also classic in older houses like this, is also on the ground floor. It is in fact that little room back there. And the pictures of the bathroom, and as is normal in French houses too, the washing machine was in the bathroom. So it's thrown up all sorts of interesting things. It's an interesting style of bathroom too. You're going to see that now in just a second. Having strictly a downstairs bathroom is not ideal, obviously. And that is one of the things that I intend to do over the next few years, is look at changing around the structure of the house a little bit, putting the bathroom upstairs and doing something with this little side part. And as we go through these videos, hopefully, as those things progress, I'll be able to show those being underway. And speaking of the upstairs, so the next lot and the final lot of the sort of beginning pictures will be one of the reasons I bought the house, because the previous owner, about 10 years ago, decided to convert the loft space upstairs into rooms. And I have to give her her due, she did it beautifully. And while the downstairs had a kind of an old-fashioned need to be renoed look about it, the upstairs does not. So not all the pictures are brilliant, but you'll see the stone walls from which I got some inspiration that I'll explain later on, and it is truly beautiful up there. Like I said, I bought the house in officially November 2018. The first opportunity I had to come and visit was in February 2019. So I arrived in February 2019. It was absolutely freezing. There was only the kitchen sink in the house. So there was no chairs, no furniture. I had gotten off the plane. I live in Dubai. I'd gotten off the plane from Dubai to Paris. I then drove from Paris down here, which is about a 4.5-hour drive. I stopped off in the lovely city of Beaune, but only to stop off at a hypermarket to buy foodstuffs. I bought a little cooler box, and that was my fridge for the week that sat out on the balcony with a bottle of wine, some ham, and some butter in it, and cheese. And I used to just make myself sandwiches every day. And I set about, I've been thinking a lot about the kitchen and how it was all put together and what I could do with it. And I had pretty much decided at that point that there was no point in having 2 rooms in that space, both of which were pokey and dark, and neither of which worked for me in the way I wanted to live. It did cause me some pause for thought, of course, because by doing that, I was turning it from a 3-bedroom into a 2-bedroom house. But I think it was worth it. And so the next set of pictures you're going to see were basically taken when I arrived. What I basically had only the surface of the sink to put my stuff around, so the little things that I sort of lived day by day in there. And then I set about knocking down the wall. Now I knew it wasn't a supporting wall because it was made of thin bricks, and you'll see. Knocking down the wall between the kitchen and the room behind, and unleashing some surprises as I did that too. And at the end of these pictures, this set of pictures that you see, I'll explain to you what and show you some video footage of the result of all of this. So what I discovered when I took down that wall was that underneath that was a beautiful beam that was covered with paint. And there were generations of spiders that were living between those MDF boards and the box and the beam. And also, you'll notice that I took up the lino from the original kitchen floor and found the very small orange. I'm all for sort of old style tiling, but it was dirty and broken in places, and I tried to pull some of it up and it was cemented down good. And so it started to become very clear to me that I was going to have to get somebody in order to do some work, because the there was a difference in the walls from the kitchen to the back room. There was a difference in the floor from the kitchen to the back room. And I looked at the box with the beam inside it and knew that this was not something that, as a part-time renovator, that I could take on myself. If I'd had more time here, then maybe. And so that basically took me up for that first week. That took me a week of fairly solid work. And I went off and took dimensions of the rooms, and I went off and had more thinking about it while I was at work in Dubai. And then I came back in the Easter holiday, essentially March of that year. And I started measuring up, and I started going around kitchen places, and I started planning for the kitchen and trying to find artisans. So one of the things about doing this in France, for me, I'm by myself. My French is fine on a social level. It's not brilliant, but it's fine. But in terms of technical things, it's difficult. And I have relied heavily on my neighbors for help. I have some fantastic neighbors here. And they recommended an artisan for me who would be able to do the walls here and the floors. And so I spoke to him, and we had discussions back and forth. There was talk at one point of underfloor heating, which was, of course, it was something my parents had put in their house, and something that appealed to me. However, well, the artisan was just shaking his head and going, "Don't be ridiculous," because underneath the kitchen area is a domed cellar, and it was just become too difficult and too expensive, and then I'd lose height in the room and all kinds of things. And for the amount of money it was going to cost me, I figured I could buy lots of pair of slippers for a fraction of the price and keep my feet warm that way. So that idea got abandoned. But what we did end up deciding, and this then happened last summer, so in July 2019, as soon as the summer holidays started in Dubai, I came over here, and the artisan started the next day, and he ripped up the old floors. Unfortunately, we lost not all of them, but the red tomettes that were in the back room. Those couldn't be salvaged for the most part. And I certainly couldn't have done the whole room with them in the time scale that I had. So I picked out new flooring. He then, because the walls were uneven between the front and back room, he then put in some insulation, because the house didn't have any of that either, even though it has very thick walls, and so probably strictly didn't really need insulation. But we decided the kitchen that I'd ordered needed very straight lines, and so we decided it was better to put up plasterboard, make a straight walls, trying to keep the beams exposed, and of course at the same time, inspired by the stonework on the walls upstairs, I decided that there must be stonework on the walls down here, and that I would chip off some of the plaster. And the next set of photos basically shows you what it looked like when I decided this, in the same week as the artisan was doing his work. That was a little nerve-wracking, that work, because I was taking quite a big risk. It could have gone horribly wrong. There could have been all kinds of disastrous things underneath there. And of course I was just making more work for myself, because I hadn't contracted the artisan to do anything about that wall. He very kindly lent me some of his power tools for the weekend so that I could chip the plaster off the wall. I also used a hammer and chisel to do it. Some of the stones had been cemented together, so I took out the cement that was in between those. I did discover that around the door, as you'll have seen in some of the photos, they had a concrete or cement lintel put over the door, and it was cemented down the sides, and that I couldn't even remove with the power tools, so I had to sort of think of what I could do with that. But otherwise I was really, really pleased with how the wall came out. And although it looks fairly rough in those pictures, because it hadn't been lime mortar at that point, I did then set about, once the walls and floors were in and the kitchen people came along, which will be the next set of photos that you see, I did set about learning how to make lime mortar. and then learning how to put it into and in between the stones in the walls. I think it worked out very well in the end. I had to do a little bit of messing about with that concrete lintel and what I was going to do with the mortar there, and I'll show you the results of that in a few minutes. At the same time as I was doing this, I was also doing an awful lot of work in the garden. So this house comes with about a 1/4 acre of garden. Another one of the main reasons that I bought the house was the lovely plot that it sits on and the views that it has. But I will show you another and talk you through the garden in another set of photos in a few minutes. But for now, the kitchen installation. The kitchen arrived a few days before the installers were due to come and put it in place. And when it arrived, the walls had been plasterboard. The plasterboard had been put up. All the first fix electrics were in, but nothing else really had been done. And it was up to me to sort of get the electrician. I had some issues with electricians. Get the electrician in, get him to finish off all the bits and pieces, and then I had to paint the plasterboard with I just decided on white at that time because I thought I don't have time for color picking, and I quite like the contrast of the white with the wood in the beams and the wood in the kitchen cupboards. Anyway, so I did that. That was a few manic days, and then the guys arrived and installed it, and it has turned out very, very well, I have to say. One of the things that I also had to do then was replace the kitchen door, because I did discover, and as I've said before, during the winter, it was like gale force winds coming in. It didn't fit properly. I tried all the little insulating solutions that I could for when I was here in the February and in March again, but nothing really worked properly. So I made the decision at that point that I needed to put in new doors. And while I was doing that, I was going to get new shutters for it as well, which in hindsight might have been a bit hasty. I should have left the shutters, but that's another story altogether. Yeah, so all of that went in. It was a mad few days, and I'm going to do a little video run of what the kitchen looks like now, just so you can see it. I will add to this video in just a second with a run of the inside of the kitchen and what it looks like. Okay, so when you come into my house, you come up onto my balcony. And this was the reason that I bought the house. Number one reason is that absolutely fabulous view and that gorgeous garden. And my main front door is this. And you'll recognize that wall, I hope, from the previous pictures. So as I walk in, I kept the sink where it originally was. I just changed it out. Looks a bit messy right now. This is what it looks like every day. My electrics box is still exposed up there, and you can see I don't have a light over that yet. I haven't found the perfect ones. And I'm waiting for a guy to make me a little door to go over that there just to cover it up, but so that the electrics are still accessible. But yeah, that's the kitchen that you saw being installed. That's what the fabulous wall looks like now. Again, there's a light that needs to go up there on the wall. And what I did is I obviously put in all of the lime mortar in there, and just as a temporary measure, I kind of added lime mortar also to the bits around the door. I just basically caked it in lime mortar around. I know I'm going to have to do something with that. That's not a long-term solution. It falls off in tiny little bits every so often. And so, yes, that is a job that needs to be tackled at some point, but that's easily done in the future if I need to. Bought various little bits and pieces of furniture for it, as you can see. The fridge sits rather nicely in that little nook, although I do think that I need a piece of furniture there just because the fridge sticks out a little bit, and it would be nice to have some kind of a dresser or something that goes there. Bizarrely, I did find those stones. So when the house was built, they obviously salvaged stones from somewhere else and used whatever stones they could in building it. And it's a rather nice feature, I think. But yes, so this is, yes, and that light probably didn't do any good in how you can see the kitchen. This is what it looks like. I'm rather pleased with the end result. I haven't quite finished doing it up. I want to put some tiles all the way around here. I've again been taking my time because I'm not in any rush, and sort of trying to pick a tile that I really like that isn't heinously expensive. And I think I've found one now. But yes, and a few other bits and pieces. I do need to paint the ceiling and put some wood filler in. That was where the old light fitting was for the kitchen, and the kitchen obviously stopped at that beam where that central beam is there, and that's what it looks like now. And so I need to do a little bit of work on the roof, not an awful lot, but it just needs a coat of paint just to bring it up to how gorgeous it should be. And that's what it looks like now. I've decided that perhaps that's enough for the first video. And it was kind of a whistle-stop tour. Future videos will be more about what I'm doing right now in here. But because I didn't think of doing this at the very start, I was kind of playing catch up on what I had done in the previous year. So the next video will be about the garden, what I did with the garden last year, and then all of the things that have come up since then and how I manage the garden when I'm not here, what happens with that. And then I'll do another video on what I'm planning with the living room, because the living room is the next bit that's being taken on. Another one on working on the outside. As you'll have seen coming into the entrance, there's a charming orange color on the front part of the house that I'm not in love with. The rest of the outside of the house is painted an equally charming green, which I'm also not in love with. I want to investigate to see, can I get the render that was put on the wall again in the 60s completely taken off, and whether that would affect the insulation of the property, and also whether or not the stone is going to be of good enough quality, like that there isn't an awful lot of cement put in like there was around, or if there is, can a decent facade renderer disguise that a little bit. So I need to get some expert advice on that. It's not a job I'm going to be able to do myself because of the height of the house on some parts. But yes, all of that I will talk about in a future video. For now, I think that will do for today. Bye.